I always thought our marriage was solid. Sure, we'd had our rough patches, but who doesn't after 7 years? I worked long hours managing a logistics company, but I did it for us so Emily could pursue her art without worrying about bills, so we could afford weekend getaways and the little luxuries she loved. I never imagined that the hours I spent building a future for us would turn into a wedge between us. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed sooner. Emily had started dressing differently, more daring dresses, heels high enough to make her a stranger to me. I chalked it up to a new gallery crowd, artists and critics who thrived on attention. She'd gotten close to Alyssa, a gallery owner who threw wild parties that always ended with hazy Instagram stories full of champagne flutes and blurred faces. I wasn't much for parties, especially not the kind that ended at sunrise, so I stayed home, watched Netflix, and trusted my wife. That Saturday night started no differently. Emily was in front of our bedroom mirror, eyes fixed on her reflection as she layered mascara and dark lipstick. Her dress, a shimmering black thing that caught the light, fit her like a secret. She caught me watching in the reflection and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Too much?" she asked, running a hand over her hip. "You look amazing," I said, and I meant it. But something in me twisted when she turned back to the mirror without a word. I offered to drop her off, but she insisted Alyssa was picking her up. I watched from our window as a black Audi pulled up, bass thumping faintly through the glass. Emily didn't kiss me goodbye. The door closed behind her, and I was left alone with the silence. By midnight, I'd fallen asleep on the couch, a half-empty beer sweating on the table. I jolted awake to the sound of my phone buzzing. 2:17 a.m. Emily's name flashed on the screen, followed by a text, "Staying at Alyssa's. Don't wait up." It was the third time that month. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, a dull ache settling in my chest. I set the phone down, but sleep didn't come easy after that. The following morning, Emily came home just after 10, sunlight striking harsh angles through the blinds. Her makeup was smudged, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. I pushed a mug of coffee across the counter, watching her hands tremble slightly as she took it. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "You could say that," she murmured, eyes darting away. I wanted to ask more, but something in her tone warned me off. That should have been the moment I pressed, asked why she'd been gone so often, why her eyes flicked to her phone every few minutes. But I told myself she was just busy, tired, stressed from the gallery. It was easier to pretend things were fine, to let the silence grow between us. A week later, I found the matchbook on the passenger seat of her car, a glossy black thing with a red logo, Rapture. I knew the place, a nightclub downtown that Alyssa's crowd favored. The kind of place where bottles came with sparklers and the music pulsed loud enough to steal your thoughts. When I asked Emily about it, she barely flinched. "Oh, that's Alyssa's favorite spot," she said, too quickly. "We went there after the gallery last week. I forgot it was even in there." She was lying. I'd never been good at spotting lies, but I knew my wife knew the way her fingers twisted in her necklace when she was hiding something. I tried to let it go, but the questions festered. That night, long after Emily had fallen asleep, I found myself scrolling through Rapture's Instagram page, a stream of photos full of neon lights, high heels, and eyes glassy with too much vodka. I tapped through them absently until one photo stopped me cold. It was Emily, barely visible at the edge of the frame, her back to the camera, but unmistakable. Her arm was slung around a man's shoulders, her head tilted back in a laugh. His hand was on her waist, fingers splayed with a familiarity that tightened my throat. I clicked on the profile tag, Luca Hales. His feed was full of club photos, VIP lounges, black leather booths, girls in dresses as tight as Emily's. A nightclub promoter, from the looks of it. His bio was a string of emojis and a location pin dropped at Rapture. I locked my phone, pulse thundering in my ears. It was probably nothing. Emily was friendly, people were always drawn to her. But as I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, the image of his hand on her waist burned behind my eyes. The next few weeks passed in a blur of strained smiles and empty conversations. I couldn't stop checking my phone, Luca's feed a maze of stories and posts that I hated myself for scrolling through. I never asked Emily about him. I was too afraid of what she might say. It wasn't until a Thursday night, when Emily came home hours late, her dress twisted and hair tangled, that the truth started to unravel. I was in the kitchen, half a bottle of whiskey down, when I heard her heels click unevenly through the hall. She paused in the doorway, eyes wide when she saw me. "You're up," she said, voice thin. "It's nearly 2, I replied evenly, watching her sway slightly. "Lost track of time?" Her eyes flicked away, guilt sharp in the air between us. "Alyssa wanted to stay late." "I didn't." "Don't," I cut in, the word scraping raw. "Don't lie to me, Emily." Her mouth parted, but nothing came out. I could see the lie dying on her tongue. I wanted her to deny it, to tell me I was being paranoid. But she just stared at the floor, fingers twisting her wedding ring. My chest ached with something bitter and hollow. I could barely get the words out. "Is it him?" Her shoulders flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but enough. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered finally, voice cracking. "It just..." I turned away, her voice splintering into static. My hands trembled with the need to hit something, to shatter the silence that was suddenly deafening. Behind me, Emily's breath hitched. "Please," she choked out. "I never wanted to hurt you." I swallowed hard, tasting whiskey and bile. The betrayal coiled in my gut, sharp and all-consuming. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. "I need to get out of here," I said hoarsely, grabbing my keys off the counter. Her voice followed me down the hall, thin and desperate, but I shut the door behind me, the slam echoing through the night. The streets were empty, slick with rain that gleamed under the streetlights. I drove aimlessly, the city passing in a blur of neon signs and darkened storefronts. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, breaths coming short and jagged. The radio played something soft and melancholic, a song about love lost, and I shut off with a snarl, the silence that followed deafening. I should have seen it coming. All the late nights, the parties, the cautious way Emily's eyes slid away whenever I asked about them. But I hadn't. I'd let myself believe her, let myself be the fool waiting at home, trusting the woman who'd been slipping away for months. The bar I pulled into was half empty, the sort of place with sticky floors and a jukebox stuck on classic rock. I slid onto a stool, ordered whiskey neat, and tried to ignore the way my hands shook as I lifted the glass. I stared at my reflection in the bar mirror, at the man who stared back, eyes shadowed, jaw clenched, a stranger wearing my face. I took a long pull of whiskey, the burn grounding me, and tried to swallow down the images that kept flashing behind my eyes. Emily in that black dress, her laugh soft and breathless, Luca's hand on her waist. I didn't want to picture the rest, the things they'd done, the way she must have smiled at him, the way she used to smile at me. But it kept coming, vicious and relentless, until the whiskey did nothing to dull the edges. 2 drinks later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen blaring bright. 5 missed calls from Emily. Her name flashed again before I could turn it off, her face smiling up from the wallpaper. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Her voice would break me, and I needed to stay angry. Anger was safer than the hollow ache in my chest, the betrayal that wrapped tight around my ribs. I downed the rest of the whiskey, the burn numbing something deep and raw, and signaled for another. It was nearly 4 by the time I stumbled back into the apartment. The lights were still on, throwing harsh shadows across the floor. Emily was curled on the sofa, her face blotchy and eyes red-rimmed, her phone clutched tight in her hand. Her head snapped up when the door clicked shut, eyes wide and desperate. "Where have you been?" Her voice was raw, hoarse like she'd been crying for hours. I shrugged off my jacket, not needing her eyes. "Out." "Out where?" she pressed, voice cracking. I was worried sick, I thought. "Thought what?" I snapped, turning to face her. The words came out sharp, vicious. "Thought I might be off with some woman who actually gives a..." Her face crumpled, guilt bleeding through her eyes. It should have felt good, making her hurt like I did, but it didn't. It just left me feeling hollow, rage bleeding into something colder. "Please," she whispered, getting to her feet. Can we talk about this?" "What's there to talk about?" My voice was flat, dead. "You've already said enough." She flinched like I'd struck her, one hand coming up to rub her arm. I'd seen her do that 100 times when she was nervous, but now it just made me sick. It didn't mean anything, she said, the words tumbling out fast and desperate. It was stupid, he made me feel noticed. Like I wasn't invisible, like I mattered. And I know that's not an excuse, but My laugh was sharp, humorless. Right. So I was just supposed to be fine with you sneaking around behind my back? Was that part of the plan, or was it just a bonus? She went pale, eyes glistening. It wasn't like that, I swear. Everything between us was so routine. I felt like I was suffocating. I barked out a laugh. So it's my fault? That's not what I. Save it, I cut her off, voice shaking with the effort of keeping it together. I don't want to hear it. You think I haven't felt suffocated? I spent years working my hands raw so you could paint in your little studio and not worry about the bills, so we could have a future, a house. And this is how you repay me? Her breath hitched, eyes shining with unshed tears. I never wanted to hurt you, she choked out. Well, you did, I said coldly. So congrats. You win. Her face crumpled, a tear slipping free. For a moment, I wanted to cross the room, to wrap her in my arms and pretend none of this was real. But the anger burned hotter, drowning the urge in ash and smoke. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. I love you, Don't, I snapped. Don't you dare say that. She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I turned away, fingers curling into fists. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I'll sleep on the couch, I muttered finally, heading for the bedroom. Her sobs followed me down the hall, raw and broken. I wanted to care, but the ache in my chest was too raw, the betrayal too fresh. I shut the door behind me, sank onto the bed, and dropped my head into my hands. Her perfume lingered in the sheets, jasmine and vanilla, sweet and cloying. I wanted to rip them off, to scrub every trace of her from the room, but all I could do was sit there, breathing hard and shaking. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under, her broken whispers haunting me even in sleep. The next morning, the apartment was empty. Emily's keys were gone from the hook, her coat missing from the rack. For a moment, panic flared, had she gone to him? But then I noticed the note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting shaky and smudged in places. Staying at Alyssa's for a few days. I understand if you need space. I love you. I'm so sorry. I crumpled the note in my fist, jaw clenched until my teeth ached. The apartment was too quiet, her absence a glaring wound. I stood there for a long time, the note crumpled in my fist, before turning on my heel and grabbing my keys. I needed air. I needed out. But as I stepped outside, the sunlight harsh and blinding, a new thought took root, cold and calculating. I'd spent enough time reeling, enough time hurt and broken. Maybe it was time to find out exactly who Luca Hales was. The city looked different when you were angry, sharper somehow, all harsh edges and flickering lights. I drove without thinking, the streets weaving into each other until I found myself parked 2 blocks from Rapture. The club was closed, metal shutters down, but the building itself loomed, black and sleek against the morning sky. I hadn't planned on coming here. I'd left the apartment with no real direction, just a need to be anywhere but there. But now that I was parked across from the place where Emily had wrapped herself around another man, leaving wasn't an option. I needed to see it. I needed to understand. It was ridiculous, sitting there in broad daylight like some spurned husband in a bad movie. But I couldn't bring myself to leave, not even when the sun climbed higher, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. I pulled up Luca's Instagram again, scrolling through photos of velvet ropes, champagne, girls in tight dresses with empty smiles. Luca Hales. Mid-30s, dark hair slicked back, a smile like a knife. His page was a gallery of decadence, VIP booths, sports cars, shots of him leaning into club girls with dead eyes and fake laughs. I hated him instantly, which was probably the point. Guys like him wore hatred like a crown. I scrolled further, past photos of bottle service and rooftop pools, until one stopped me cold. Emily, laughing in a silver dress I'd never seen before, eyes bright and soft. Luca's arm slung casually around her waist, fingers curling possessively at her hip. The caption was a single flame emoji. The comments blurred together: heart eyes, fire, tongues. I locked my phone, pulse thundering in my ears. She'd told me it was a mistake. That it didn't mean anything. But the way she leaned into him in that photo, the way her eyes crinkled with a smile I hadn't seen in months, told a different story. The passenger door opened suddenly, and I flinched so hard my head smacked the headrest. Alyssa slid in, shutting the door behind her with a click that felt too final. Her eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, her mouth twisted with something between pity and guilt. "You look like hell," she said, pushing her glasses up. I dragged a hand down my face, trying to swallow the flash of anger. "Is she with you?" "She's at my apartment," Alyssa said evenly. "She didn't want to stay at yours." "Not after." Her voice trailed off, but I caught the implication. "Not after I found out." My jaw tightened. "How long?" She sighed, running a manicured hand through her hair. "A few months. Maybe 4? I didn't keep track." "A few months." I'd been married to Emily for 7 years. 4 months wasn't a mistake, it was a second life. I stared out the windshield, knuckles white around the steering wheel. "And you didn't think to tell me?" My voice was flat, dead. "I told her to," Alyssa said, irritation sharpening her tone. "I told her to end it before it got worse." But she didn't," I cut in coldly. Alyssa's mouth pressed into a thin line. "She was scared. Of hurting you. Of what you'd do if you found out." The laugh that tore out of me was bitter and humorless. "Yeah, well. Guess we're past that point." She was silent for a long moment, fingers tapping an agitated rhythm against her thigh. "Listen," she said finally, voice gentler. "Luca's bad news. I told her that from the start. He goes after girls like her, ones who want to feel special. But he gets bored. It's what he does." Something icy slithered down my spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Alyssa sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose, "he's not worth throwing your life away for. I know you're hurt, but don't do anything stupid." I gripped the steering wheel harder, the leather creaking beneath my fingers. "Does he know about me?" Alyssa snorted. "Of course he does. That's half the fun for him. Taking something that isn't his." The words hit like a punch, leaving me breathless and dizzy. The thought of Luca laughing about me, about my marriage, made my hands shake. I forced out a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need to talk to him," I ground out. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. "Don't be an idiot. Luca's connected, people owe him favors. You start something, and you'll be the one paying for it." I ignored her, fingers already curling around the keys. "Thanks for the warning," I muttered, twisting them in the ignition. "Ryan," Alyssa snapped, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug in, her voice low and urgent. "Please. I care about Emily too. Just go home. Cool off. Don't make this worse than it already is." Her eyes were wide, pleading, and for a moment, I almost listened. But then the image of Luca's hand on Emily's waist flashed behind my eyes, and the anger roared back to life. I pulled my arm free, threw the car into drive, and left her sitting in the passenger seat, her curses fading into the rearview mirror. Luca's apartment was in one of those high-rises downtown where the lobby floors gleamed like mirrors and the doorman sized you up with a practiced glance. I stalked past the front desk, the security guard barely lifting an eyebrow. The elevator ride was suffocating, each floor ticked off with a dull chime. I found the door, 1907, dark wood, a gold plate that gleamed mockingly in the hallway light. My knuckles hit the door once, twice, hard enough to sting. It swung open, and there he was, Luca Hales, taller than I'd imagined, dark hair tousled, shirt unbuttoned just enough to show a glimpse of tattooed skin. His eyes flicked over me, lazy and unbothered, a slow grin spreading across his mouth. "Well," he drawled, voice smooth as glass. "Wasn't expecting company." What can I do for you, buddy? Buddy. The word snapped something in me. I had him shoved against the wall, fist twisted in his collar, before I could think twice. His grin widened, infuriatingly calm. Wow, easy there. Didn't think Emily's husband had it in him. The taunt made my blood boil. Stay away from my wife, I ground out, voice low and lethal. He chuckled, not even bothering to fight back. Bit late for that, don't you think? My fist slammed into his jaw, the impact jarring up my arm. Luca staggered, a smear of blood bright against his lip, but the grin didn't falter. If anything, it spread wider. I get it, he said, voice slurred. You feel powerless. She wanted more than you could give her, so you blame me. But this, he gestured to his split lip, grinning through blood, this won't change a thing. I wanted to hit him again, to keep hitting until that smug grin shattered. But his words cut deeper than any punch, and suddenly, my hands were trembling too badly to hold on. I let him go, stumbling back a step, breath coming fast and ragged. His grin turned sharp, cruel. Go home, buddy. You've already lost. I didn't remember leaving, didn't remember the elevator ride or the street or how I ended up slumped behind the wheel, hands shaking and knuckles bleeding. But the words echoed in my head, over and over, until I had to choke back something dangerously close to a sob. I'd already lost. And there was nothing left to do but burn. When I got back to the apartment, the silence was suffocating. The sun was setting, painting the walls in shades of amber and shadow. Emily's things were everywhere, her jacket draped over the back of the couch, her favorite mug in the sink, a tube of lipstick left uncapped on the bathroom counter. It was like she was still here, lingering in the corners of every room, but the emptiness was a knife twisting in my gut. I scrubbed the blood from my knuckles at the kitchen sink, watching it swirl pink down the drain. My reflection in the window was gaunt, eyes hollow, and red-rimmed. The adrenaline from my confrontation with Luca was gone, leaving me raw and aching. I could still hear his taunts, could still see that smug grin stretched across his bloody mouth. You've already lost. I gripped the counter, breathing hard, trying to ignore the tremor in my hands. There was whiskey in the cabinet above the stove, and I considered it, just to numb the edges for a while. But the burn wouldn't last, and the last thing I needed was to be drunk and alone with my thoughts. I grabbed my phone instead, fingers clumsy and stiff, and scrolled through my contacts until I found his name. It rang twice before he picked up, voice low and cautious. Ryan? Jason sounded groggy, like I'd woken him up, but the concern in his voice was immediate. What's going on, man? It's late. Are you busy? My voice cracked halfway through, rough and strained. I cleared my throat, forced it steady. I could use a drink. A pause, then a sigh. I'll meet you at Mac's in 20. Mac's was half empty, the kind of dive bar that smelled like spilled beer and old leather, with neon signs buzzing faintly above the booths. Jason was already at a corner table, a bottle of beer in hand and another waiting. He looked up when I slid into the booth, his eyes narrowing at the bruises on my knuckles. Should I see the other guy? He asked dryly, pushing the second bottle across the table. Shut up, I muttered, but the corner of my mouth twitched despite everything. We sat in silence for a while, the clink of glasses and low murmur of voices filling the gaps. I nursed the beer, picking at the label until it shredded under my nails. Jason didn't push, just watched me with that steady, level gaze that had gotten us through more than one bar fight in college. It's Emily, I said finally, the words tasting bitter and foreign on my tongue. She's been seeing someone else. Jason's jaw tightened, eyes darkening. That club promoter? My head snapped up. How did you? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I heard rumors. Alyssa's been throwing her name around a lot, and you know how people talk. I didn't want to believe it. I stared at the table, breath hitching. Neither did I. Another silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Jason shifted, fingers drumming against his bottle. So, what now? I don't know, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I went to see him. Luca. Told him to stay away from her. And I huffed a humorless laugh. He basically told me I'd already lost. Jason's eyes flashed, grip tightening on the bottle. That smug piece of. Doesn't matter, I cut in, voice flat. He's right. She's not coming back. The words broke something in me, left me raw and exposed. Jason's expression softened, his hand coming to rest heavy on my shoulder. I'm sorry, man, he said quietly. You don't deserve this. I swallowed hard, the burn of tears sharp at the back of my throat. I don't know what I did wrong. Nothing, Jason said fiercely. You loved her. That's not on you. The conviction in his voice cracked something deep inside, and I had to look away, blinking hard against the tears. I couldn't fall apart here, not in a bar with sticky floors and a jukebox playing old rock ballads. But the ache was relentless, tearing through me with every breath. I can't just let her go, I whispered finally, voice raw. Not without a fight. Jason's eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? I gripped the bottle so tight my knuckles went white. She's staying at Alyssa's, I said slowly. I just need to talk to her. Figure out why. Ryan, Jason warned, but I was already standing, the chair scraping back harshly. I have to try, I muttered, tossing a few bills on the table. I'll call you later. I didn't wait for his reply, didn't trust myself to. The air outside was cold and biting, so bring me up with every step. Alyssa's apartment wasn't far, aloft in one of those old red brick buildings with wrought iron balconies and ivy creeping up the sides. I'd only been there once, for some art gallery opening that ended in champagne flutes and strained smiles. The walk was a blur, breath misting in the chill, streetlights casting long shadows. By the time I reached the building, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely press the intercom. Alyssa answered after 3 rings, her voice scratchy with sleep. Who? It's Ryan, I said, too quickly. I just need to talk to Emily. Please. A pause, then a sigh crackling through the speaker. Come up, she muttered, the door buzzing open. Alyssa met me at the door, hair mussed and eyes tired. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside and nodded toward the living room. Emily was curled on the couch, one of Alyssa's hoodies draped over her shoulders, eyes rimmed red and glassy. She jerked upright when she saw me, guilt and panic flashing across her face. Ryan! Don't, I cut in, voice low and shaking. Don't you dare lie to me again. She flinched, arms wrapping tight around herself. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I didn't. Why? The word tore out, raw and desperate. Just tell me why, Emily. Was I not enough? Did I? My voice cracked, breath hitching painfully. Did I do something wrong? Tears slipped down her cheeks, her hands trembling. No, she whispered. You were perfect. That was the problem. I stared, heart stuttering. What? Her breath hitched, voice cracking. You loved me too much. I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped. Luca made me feel free. Like I could be someone else, just for a while. The words were a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. I stumbled back, throat tight and aching. So this is my fault, I managed hoarsely. Her eyes widened, horror bleeding into the guilt. No, that's not what Ryan, please. But I was already turning, vision blurring, her voice chasing me down the hall. I hit the stairwell at a run, legs trembling and breaths coming sharp and shallow. The weight of her words pressed down, suffocating, each step echoing in the silence. By the time I stumbled into the cold night air, the tears were streaming unchecked, hot against the chill. I sank onto a bench, breath fogging, fingers buried in my hair. She was gone. And I didn't know how to let her go. I don't remember much of what happened after I left Alyssa's apartment. The night blurred into a haze of headlights and icy air biting my cheeks, my hands numb from clutching the steering wheel. I must have driven for hours, past the city limits, through darkened streets and empty intersections, trying to outrun the words that kept replaying in my head. You loved me too much. I couldn't breathe. By the time I pulled into the driveway, dawn was a thin streak of gray on the horizon. The house loomed, dark and quiet, every window a hollow eye. I shut the engine off and just sat there, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, breaths coming sharp and uneven. She was gone. The words twisted deep, left me hollow and raw, each breath a reminder that the life I'd built was falling apart brick by brick. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I was too tired, too drained to do anything but sit there, head pounding and eyes stinging. I stumbled inside eventually, toes numb and fingers shaking too bad to get the key in the lock on the first try. The apartment was dark and cold, Emily's things scattered everywhere like a crime scene, her scarf draped over the chair, her paintbrushes in a jar by the window, the wine glasses still out from dinner last week. I hadn't touched a thing since she left. Couldn't bring myself to. I collapsed on the couch, staring at the ceiling until the edges of my vision blurred and sleep dragged me under, dreams full of black dresses and bright lights and her laugh, soft and breathless in the dark. I woke to the sound of knocking. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, disoriented and groggy, sunlight slanting harshly through the curtains. But then it came again, a hesitant tap-tap, and I dragged myself up, rubbing at gritty eyes. Jason stood on the other side of the door, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, face lined with concern. He took one look at me and sighed. "You look like hell," he muttered, pushing past me into the living room. "Feel like it," I croaked, voice rough from sleep. I shut the door, scrubbing a hand over my face. "What are you doing here?" I called. "Like, 10 times. He nodded at my phone, lying dead and dark on the kitchen counter. "You went radio silent after you left Max." I was about to call the cops. I grunted, sinking into the couch. "Sorry." He sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "Ryan, what the hell happened?" I stared at the floor, the words a weight on my tongue. But the silence stretched, and eventually, it all came spilling out, the confrontation with Luca, what Emily had said, the way her voice cracked and how I just left. Jason didn't interrupt, just listened, fingers drumming a slow, steady rhythm against his knee. When I finally ran out of words, my throat was raw and aching, the silence pressing heavy. Jason blew out a breath, scrubbing a hand over his jaw. "Jesus," he muttered. "That's a lot." "Yeah," I said hoarsely, eyes burning. "I screwed up." Jason snorted. "How, exactly?" I gestured weakly at the mess of our living room, at the half-packed suitcase by the door, Emily's things still strewn everywhere. "I should've, I don't know. Fought harder, noticed sooner. Done something. Ryan." Jason's voice was sharp, almost harsh. I looked up, startled, and he fixed me with a glare. "This is not on you. She made her choice. You can't blame yourself for that." "I should have seen it coming," I whispered, voice cracking. His gaze softened. "You trusted her," he said quietly. "There's no shame in that." The words hit hard, something in my chest loosening painfully. I swallowed, blinking fast, but the tears came anyway, hot and humiliating. I turned away, scrubbing at my face, but Jason's hand landed heavy on my shoulder, grounding and steady. "It's okay," he muttered, voice rough. "Just let it out, man. You're allowed to." So I did. The next few days passed in a daze. I called out of work, ignored the dozen voicemails piling up, and spent most of my time slumped on the couch, Jason forcing me to eat takeout and drink water like some overgrown child. I must have thanked him 100 times, and each time he just waved me off, muttering that I'd do the same for him. I didn't ask if Emily had called. I didn't want to know. It wasn't until Friday that I found the strength to move, to strip the bed, pack her things into boxes, anything to fill the silence that hung heavy and suffocating. I threw out the wine glasses, stuffed her clothes into bags for donation, wiped down the bathroom sink until the bleach stung my nose. By the time I was done, my hands were raw and aching, the apartment stripped bare, all traces of her erased. It was cathartic, in a way painful, but clean. Like tearing off a bandage to finally let the wound breathe. The last thing left was her ring. I found it on the nightstand, glinting cold and bright against the wood. I turned it over in my palm, thumb brushing the band, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I closed my eyes, her smile flashing behind my eyelids, and slipped it into an envelope without a word. I didn't expect her to show up the next day. But there she was, standing in the doorway, eyes swollen and dark-circled, hair pulled into a messy knot. She flinched when I opened the door, fingers twisting in her sleeves, eyes darting past me into the empty apartment. "You cleaned up," she stammered, voice small. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed tight. "Needed to be done." She swallowed, eyes glistening. I just wanted to talk. Please." I almost slammed the door right there. Almost told her to go to hell and take her apologies with her. But the words stuck, throat too tight to force them out. I exhaled slowly, stepping aside. 5 minutes, I muttered, voice flat. "Then I want you gone." She nodded, eyes flicking to the ring on the kitchen counter, the envelope beside it. Her breath hitched, fingers trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I am. I never wanted to hurt you." I huffed a laugh, bitter and cold. "Yeah, well. You did." She flinched, tears slipping free, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not when the betrayal still ached so raw and deep. I needed you to know," she choked out, voice breaking. "That it wasn't you. It was never you." I was scared, and "Save it," I snapped, turning away. "Just go, Emily." Her breath stuttered, eyes wide and glistening, but she nodded, a broken sound catching in her throat. She reached for the ring, fingers brushing the band, and I bit back the urge to rip it from her hand. She hesitated at the door, eyes searching mine, but I stared past her, jaw clenched and eyes burning. "I loved you," she whispered finally, voice cracking. The door clicked shut behind her, the silence deafening. I sank to the floor, breath shuddering, and let the tears come, hot and bitter and endless. She was gone. But maybe, someday, I'd be okay.